Right, everybody. Okay. Wonderful. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle Ellicott. It's a good day from around the world. I'm the co-founder at Topio Networks. I also head up our blockchain and distributed ledgers division, where I continually do research around the industry at all levels on what's happening, specifically around the infrastructure of blockchain and decentralized applications and more. And so today, I'm very honored to be a part of this event, ETH Atlanta, and a big shout out to again, the ETH Atlanta team, to the Baseline team, and to Kyle for bringing us all together. And also hello to the entire Atlanta community that is driving and working on distributed ledger technologies along with blockchain as a whole, making what we're going to be talking about today possible going forward. And so today's topic, I wanted to talk a little bit about contact tracing, right? This is a growing topic that has emerged due to, or really been accelerated due to the situation over the last 6 months with COVID-19. But it's something that will probably be implemented and looked at going forward, and not just because of COVID, but of many other benefits that can come from this, whether that's in the workplace or outside of it. But today we're going to focus a little bit on the really the building of the applications, where you should be focusing, or where different opportunities are and how things have changed, and mostly from the area of the enterprise. And so I hope today we were able to get a few of your questions answered, or if anything, really be able to engage into a new conversation as we look to figure out really, where do we go from here? What are the standards that we need to set in place, and how should this be built in the best, safest, and really most beneficial way for all of us around the world? All right. So just to lay a foundation, as the audience, just make sure everyone has an understanding. So as I said, I do a lot of research in this space and have been monitoring it uh, pretty specifically since 2018, so for the past 2 years, where I started researching at the infrastructure level of blockchain. So all that we're going to kind of talk about today, and what Baseline, Provable, and so many others have put together, I started looking at back in 2018 and researched about 1,500 companies in the space, and started building a taxonomy, so a navigational map, if you will, of how to look at the industry, if you were building in it or looking at building pieces of it. And from those 1,500, found just under 400 companies that were really positioned to be supportive if you were building anything on the infrastructure level or application level in the early days. And then every quarter continued to update this taxonomy to give a more improved, really more specific roadmap as to how to understand this industry when it's changing every 30 seconds in some cases. And this all leads up to, again, what we're going to be talking today, introducing the topic of contact tracing, and how this may look, and how it does look today, but even further going forward. And in 2019, we saw the rise of the enterprise. Saw a lot of companies at the enterprise level, not just talking about press releases, but really getting involved and starting to, introduce early uh, pieces of infrastructure, early applications, and kind of figuring out how blockchain or DLT, distributed ledgers, would fit within the organization. Going into Q3, we saw the rise of decentralized finance, more improved infrastructure, and decentralized applications, again, leading us to what we're going to be speaking about shortly. And then at the end of the year in 2019, we saw the landscape really over double in size, going on almost 800 companies. And this is when things took off like a rocket ship. And at the same time, decentralized apps, DApps, really became not just a conversation topic, but something that we wanted to start paying attention to, as the way we were thinking, the way we were designing, and the way that both consumers and enterprises were really demanding applications to go in the future. And so I took this opportunity at the end of the year last year, 2019, to kind of build a similar taxonomy or a guide to what it takes to build a decentralized application um, through and through. So whether you wanted to start at the very beginning and get to the end, or you were looking at pieces at what you needed to build, because traditional applications have been straightforward, whether that was the early days of web to mobile, and then even advanced web applications to now decentralized. It's not a single path. It's very all over the place in a good way, but also difficult to navigate. And then in Q1 2020, so just as we entered the year, we saw an explosion. This new era where applications, finance, and many areas of infrastructure would just surge and improve in ways that we could only imagine, setting a foundation going forward for the next 10 years and beyond. So a little bit more context, everyone looks at blockchain or again, DLT and expects it all to just work. Be here today, let's do this. But I think we do tend to forget that some of the greatest things in history, whether that were great civilizations or cities to industries to technologies such as the internet, really were not built in a single day, right? These took not just years and early decades, but took many decades. You look at the web today, we're still evolving the web. It's still being built. And so I like to bring this up as further context, where we are in terms of this world. And back in 2008, just again, to recap our history, Satoshi Nakamoto releases the white paper for this really wild concept of a peer-to-peer, so P2P electronic cash system called Bitcoin, right? We all know what it is today, but back then this was something early. And just shortly after the release of this white paper, the Genesis block was mined and Bitcoin became Bitcoin. Fast forward to 2013, the general theory of decentralized applications was released. And this was the very earliest foundation that David Johnson, along with about 8 or 9 other technologists from around the world in different industries, put together for us to look at how the future of applications would be built and how they would operate, along with a classification system and best practices as well. Because again, these new levels of applications are not as singular as applications had been up until this point. And then in 2017, 2019, we saw a lot of activity. And specifically around applications, we saw infrastructure, we saw usage, we saw everything in between being tested at all levels, consumer and enterprise, really to understand what do we need to improve on? Where are the holes? Where are the areas of opportunity that we can build and scale these applications to the level that we're going to need for not just hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions, but billions of people to be able to use one day. And that brings us to today. So almost going through about just over a decade at this point, still looking at how this technology is growing and improving, which is exciting, but also brings a lot of questions into where things go. So here's a quick overview of what I call the stack. And from left to right, you're going to see over almost 300 different companies here that have really been building in the application layer of a decentralized app and infrastructure in particular. And these are companies, so this guide you can read from left to right: infrastructure, scaling, contracts to application, to build an app all the way end to end. Or you can work with those at the top as developer platforms to really create an all-in-one solution. And then you have companies like Baseline and others that are providing the methodology at how we should be not just integrating technology, but building applications even further. And so when we look at this and we think about this in the context of contact tracing, contact tracing is a big, exciting, and also very scary term. And the reason for that is it's 1, contact, 2, tracing, which means we're being tracked in some way, shape, or form. And how we handle that, or how we build and think about building applications, will require so many of these decentralized pieces. And so I wanted to make sure that you, our audience, got the chance to see how this is shaping up, because whether the applications are decentralized or they're pieces of it that are centralized, it's important to understand how this actually can be all very decentralized and probably will need to be as we go forward, right? So you start in the beginning on the left-hand side with infrastructure, picking the right blockchain or the right platform to begin with. So in relation to where we are today, Ethereum working as a public blockchain is a great place to start. Working with a company like Baseline and others, whether it's EV blockchain as well, to really get your base put in. And then you're going to need to scale this thing, right? We're talking, as we look at contact tracing, this isn't hundreds, right? This isn't small little towns. This is tens to hundreds of millions of people around the world that are going to need to use this. And the amount of transactions, or if you will, really engagements that are going to be happening are going to be endless. And so we're going to need an application that really improves and really can dynamically work and interact with said blockchain or a database in some way. That information is going to need to be stored as things are being tracked, as things are going to be recorded. We want to make sure that they are not just stored in many places, so redundancy, but maybe time limited, may have the need to be distributed to further privacy, for instance, as well, which is going to require more computing power as we're going to have to do something with this data that we've collected. And we're also going to want to make sure that it's trusted, as it may be coming from a third party, whether that be our phone, that be the platform APIs that we're working with. And then the contract layer. And this we're going to dive into in just a moment, but then that leads us into the application. So how do these applications look? How do they feel? How do we interact with them? Are they on our phones? Are they in browser? Is there a check-in? There's so many moving pieces to this bigger puzzle. So as I said, I wanted to dive a little deeper into the contract layer. And this is where the dots get connected. So once we have our infrastructure in place, we have storage, whether that's cloud, that's traditional decentralized storage as today. We want to look at the contract layer because now we get into rules. So when thinking about building a contract tracing application for COVID and for others, as I think that this is something that's going to go beyond COVID. Right now, it's perfect a solution for COVID, as we need to make sure that things are being tracked, not just on a super micro or hyper local level, but also within buildings, within our offices, within our neighborhoods and beyond. And so that is going to require many, again, levels of storage. It's also going to require an increased level of truth, an increased level of anonymity, right? Anonymous, an increased level of privacy, of data management, of security in general. And so I bring up this particular layer, and something for you to think about in our audience is, this all really begins with identity and authentication. So as identity has improved and really dramatically changed over the last 6 months, the idea of decentralized identity or global identity, or DID, decentralized identity, comes into play more than ever. And that's the idea that we not just have a driver's license or a passport, would it be, but we actually have an identity, and that includes certain certificates, whether that be you have been tested in the relation of COVID, you have been provided any kind of medicine, your whereabouts, whatever that may be. That's all attached to this one particular identity, so that the company that's doing the tracking and tracing understands that that is attached to Kyle, and that from there, that follows me in a good way to the organizations I may be a part of, I may be with. I'm able to share that information with whom I need to or who I want to, which is very key. Data management. Right now, the two biggest companies that are playing in this space around contract tracing include Google, and Apple. These are two companies that also own their entire ecosystem, from the phones, in some cases, the chipsets, to the firmware, to the software, and to the applications. They own everything, which means as users, we no longer have that control. We no longer have that ability to manage who sees what, or what data is being collected, what data is not being collected, and what data is not being shared. So identity and authentication are very key areas to be focused on, because we want this to be managed in a certain way. We want this to be held on to us, but at the same time, we also want that data to be shared anonymously as well. And so now comes into smart contracts. And smart contracts, again, for our audience, very simply gives us our rules and regulations, what can and cannot happen. So when you think about this on the level of COVID, how data is or is not shared, when it is or it is not shared, right? If we're looking at connecting via Bluetooth versus GPS, which is a whole nother bigger conversation, how should that data be shared? When should it be shared? When should it not? And again, looking at hyperlocal to the macro level as well. But now we get into the governance. So now how is that data, or how are these applications being governed? Who has control? Who has say? How do things change, right? If we need to share different types of information, who approves that? Where is the council? And Baseline, and not to self-plug here, but Baseline's protocol and the methodology really helps bring these three areas very much of highlight, but also together in a very simplified form, whether again that be for the enterprise or us as consumers. Because while these other players, again, the corporates, governments, or even telecoms are also playing in the space, their governance is their governance. We're not necessarily a part of that as the enterprise. We don't understand what data is being shared, let alone the openness of data privacy, or lack thereof in some cases, what information is being managed or shared with others, where it's going. And also, this is just the general vulnerability of things being hacked, which is why blockchain comes into a great position at looking at how to handle contact tracing, again, whether that be for COVID or for future opportunities as well. And so, I do want to leave you with a few things here. So right now, there are a few groups, including Baseline, but also COVID Creds, MiPasa, that are working on building solutions for contact tracing. There's also the Web3 Foundation, who is putting massive efforts into creating a standard for companies looking to build a decentralized identity, or the future of identity. So when you're thinking about contact tracing, it shouldn't be in the negative context. It actually should be in a very positive, but positive in the sense of how can we solve this with the best technology that we have today that will continue to be future-proof as things go, will also scale, provide the best trust, transparency, and privacy that we all need, along with our data management. And how do we package all of that and bring it into our new global IDs? How do we bring that into this new identification system that we are moving towards, that really can put management of our identities back into our hands as individuals to help those on the enterprise level? Again, tons more to unpack here. Would love to go deeper on this. Looking forward to coming back to ETH Atlanta to really open all this up and to dive into some of these ideas so we can focus again on privacy, on management, and on trust, along with rights and governance, each and every one of those, as we look to really put some solutions together here going forward. I'm Kyle Ellicott, co-founder of Topio Networks. Again, thank you, ETH Atlanta. Thank you to Baseline. Make sure you do check out the Baseline protocol website, as we do have some examples on how this can all come together for you and your organization anywhere globally today. Thank you very much, and have a great day, everybody.